Hello and welcome to the Hemet Film Festival podcast. I'm Gabriel Diaz, one of the co-founders and the host of the podcast, and today I'm joined by Hunter Hawkins, an artist, a filmmaker, a director, I would say a multi-potentialite, if you'll let me throw something quite so highfalutinous out there. But I'm so glad to have you on, Hunter. And is there anything I missed that I should throw in there?
That's everything. Got the movies, got the music. Just trying to do a lot of different. I am doing a lot of different things. Thank you for
So,
having me.
of course, I've been looking forward to this one because I think there's just so many interesting things we can talk about. I was blown away by the Bowler Up that was in the film festival, and also watching one of your other submitted films of Dawn. Going through that again, I think we should definitely talk about that, and maybe we'll have that as one of the videos we put on the website for people to check out. But I guess we can start with just I always like to figure out how people got into their craft or the desire of sort of an artistic. It seems like you've tried out a ton of things and are even still trying a lot of things. Was there a genesis point for like the artistic approach? Was it always something you had? Like where did that develop for you?
And are you saying for just any artistic process, or like specifically with film, or specifically related to Bowler Up?
Sort of just to you specifically. Like some people have the like I was making, films on a little like camcorder with my brother when I was 6. Some
Oh
people have
yeah,
like, oh, I was painting right away and then I transitioned. Whatever that
I love
story
this
is for you.
question. Okay, yeah, this is a great question. Well, I started performing really, really young, and before that, I think it's like there's a few different kind of energy spaces for me creatively. There's a performing side that's like and that's more like read what's on the page or like do what they said, but it's coming through you and it's through your body, and the experience is yeah, it's more about experience, and how you're feeling. And then there's more story, and that is like writing, directing, or kind of like being more the manipulator or the leader of things rather than the actor of things, or the presenter of things. And I think for story, the first thing that comes to mind is in, going to bed, my dad would read us bedtime stories and do all these fun, crazy voices all the time. And fun fact, every Christmas, he still loves reading us the Christmas themed books. So this year, he opened it up more to our family. Like, we had like a little round table, and we all like read a page each of like 5 books. But so I think performing wise, both of my parents, very dramatic, very big, very expressive, a lot of feelings. And so that just like was always pretty much there. But interestingly, also, I don't think I felt like able to, or like there was maybe room that much at certain times growing up for me to be that way just in life. So I think performing kind of showed up as a way to just funnel that energy and go like, oh wow, I feel these things, this is the acceptable way, or this is the
Hmm.
place that has room to do that. And then when it comes to story writing and storytelling, I had this awesome, my school in elementary had some really cool programs up in the Bay Area. They're called Nueva School. One for music, and then also just a lot of their classwork they were very, very good with math and humanities. But for me, especially humanities and like writing, they had a really great creative writing class that was available. I can't remember if they made us, I think it was like a mandated thing. But I loved my teacher. I connected a lot with her. Teachers definitely at that time were a big source of, and forever, but especially like at that time, they were like the entryway in to me feeling like, well, one, being introduced to things and ways of doing things and feeling like I could do those things. So I wrote like a 60-page novella in 6th grade, which was not the assignment. It was supposed to be like 15 pages or something, but I just got so into it. And I was totally encouraged. Like the deadlines were different for me. Like she really like catered to what I was doing. It was called Flute Gosh. It was the name of the main character, who was a very sweet, born into a family of trolls, and and he but for forever he like the story starts with him feeling like very out of place. He doesn't like eating the slop or doing the jobs that the trolls have to do, and and then we discover in this like forest woodland place that he lives, there's also the fairies, and he's so like curious about what the fairies are like or how they live, and he kind of wants to be one. And by the way, too, at this point, I had no knowledge of like gender or anything like no education in that way. But it's almost like a trans story in a way, because by the end so he's loving the fairies. He's with them, but he notices they're very different. Like they look different, and the things he can do with his body, like he can't like fly, for instance, or he can't do all these magical things, but he is giving something to their community that's unique to him. And then by the end of the story, it's like, okay, I can't live with the fairies. It's not like working exactly for me in there. I don't want to go back to the trolls. I feel totally like, where do I belong? And then he discovers that just outside of the forest, there is a like little village slash civilian area kingdom of gnomes, which I guess gnomes fit into this world. So he's like, oh, I'm a gnome. And, it's like somewhere in between. So when I wrote that, I felt really, really, really motivated to just be as detailed. I saw the world so vividly, and I felt so free in writing, or just like the kind of like transcendental space that I at that time for the first time was able to go in that way.
And how old were you at this point?
I was in 6th grade, so I think I was 11.
11. Man, 11's a great age to like discover the flow state of something, right? Just whoa, time's passed.
Totally. And it did feel like that. Was like, time's passed. The only thing that I felt before that relating to at all, like flow state wise, was like, if I would literally, the school was in a really beautiful, like nature-y area. And so they had this thing for recess where we could go into the forts. And it's just basically this downhill thing.
That's rad.
I know, it was awesome. Can I swear? I don't know.
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay, great. And so I was, for whatever reason, at that age, I didn't feel, let's say, I didn't feel like, I'm looking for the word, like something like the way a citizen feels to their queen, to any specific like cliquey type group, or like
you weren't sort of subservient or
yeah,
or connected to any specific.
I had like one friend in each little thing, so I called myself a little.
Really?
Yes.
Floater. Okay. I was very much the same way throughout middle school and high school. I used to call myself a stray dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I would sort of just fit with groups, but I wasn't like in that clique or in that group. I'd hang out with them for a bit and there'd be a connection point, and then I'd be like, I'd wander off somewhere else.
Right, totally. Yeah, there you go.
Floater seems way nicer. I feel like stray dog is maybe too harsh on myself.
Well, you know what I really Floater also kind of sounds like poop. That's like a term some people use for poop. So I don't know. But I find
it all ends up in the same place. So
it all does. Both of us, we were like, we need to have a name for this, though. Like, if we refuse to be categorized in real life, we will self-categorize with the label.
I mean, that's an important thing, right? Self-categorization, like.
I mean, like, if you're picking up, in your society, like, oh, people don't understand what I am unless I like give myself a little brand, or they don't know whether to accept or reject or whatever, or like if they're the kind of person to have like a gut feeling thing, or like you're on my side or you're not, or kind of a fear-based thing. And so
it's always us and them, right?
Yeah, it's like, okay, give me your label. We'll put it through the system and see if it works.
Oh, you didn't mark all the bubbles correctly. The Scantron didn't read. Sorry.
No, right, exactly. So you don't exist, actually. But yeah, at that time, so the reason I bring my floater energy up is that at recess, all the kids at a certain point would start going to the library instead of the forts. And so it was like super free reign, or it was just like the younger kids, and they had their recess at a different time, actually. So I would go down there by myself. Wasn't really supposed to, because you have to have a teacher around. And I would just like sing. I didn't even have like I think I would often just make up songs. I did that on my Grammy's ranch in Oregon a lot too. When I was riding the horse in the pasture, I didn't think anybody was hearing me. Come to find out later, they could hear fucking everything because it's so quiet out there. Like yards away, like forever away,
There's
like at a
nothing to
house.
dampen the sound. It just
There's nothing to dampen the sound. I'm
travels.
just like singing. I'm singing about Jesus, and I'm singing, like all the stuff my Grammy is especially talking to me about when I'm up on the ranch. But not really, having my own religious practice, but other than like going to church with my family and stuff, in the way that like you grow up and people take you places because you're a kid, and
Yeah.
that's
A lot of people have that shared experience of religion wasn't something they per se chose. They just were going to a thing that
yeah,
their family took them to.
exactly. And I really like I love the music parts, and I really connected with like there is that like the prayer thing. For myself, I luckily didn't grow up with a relationship to religion that was like super super guilt-y. I think there were some things, some themes, or some like shame elements, but most of it for me, like I guess what I globbed onto was just enjoying the idea that someone was watching out for me. And my granny would always tell me like, count your blessings, or like thank your angels for being there. And I really visualized like a little ring of angels around me. And so I think my imagination was definitely, and not in like a snarky way, like I was imagining angels or whatever, and like they don't exist, or that kind of
No,
thing.
no,
I
I
mean,
get you.
more like my ability to visualize and feel, or like kind of inspire trust when so much of whatever is going on around me feels really turbulent. That was very helpful too. And so yeah, that was a very long-winded answer to
No, it's great.
the question, but I feel like I could talk about that forever.
Well, something that stands out to me with you talking about that, I feel like in having these podcasts and talking with people that are very sort of artistically minded or creative, you kind of touched on it when you're talking about like the director versus actor kind of part, right? There's the director kind of is helping to shape the visual that's there and try to define it within inside an already created sort of framework. And the actor is the one that's sort of taking information and sieving it through them and then putting it back out in a certain way. It's more transformative for them. And I think what you're describing right there makes perfect sense of that sort of actor innate talent. You're taking this information and, the sort of religious values of it, and it's coming out of you in the idea of like expressing that and being aware of something that's beyond you and feeling comfortable and taking all of that. And it feels to me intrinsically tied to how we process knowledge. Like that artistic mindset is just a way that people process information that's given to them. Because when we're young, we don't have a frame of reference. We have to figure it out as we go.
Yeah, exactly.
So why not do it in a really fun way where you can think about fairies and trolls and like gnomes? That seems to me way more interesting.
Absolutely. And I will say, things being interesting is lifelong motivator for me to
Yes.
do anything. Things being interesting. Oh my God. Like safe or not, it's like, it's a way to, I think you have to be really, really open to see something new that you haven't seen before. Or like, you have to be open to like talking, if you're in a place where there's, you're on your own and you basically can like, you're like in a record shop or whatever, you talk to strangers, or you meet the owner of the thing, or and then they're like, oh, come to my New Year's party, and they're like, sure. And then there's like a lot of really crazy like other creative, or kind of following whatever path based on what's interesting.
So yeah, so we're talking about that kind of creative element that sieves through people and the kind of differentiation between director and actor. You've shared the story of kind of going to the woods, being heard, but also being able to explore this. So was that kind of to you what felt like the genesis point for like that creative spark? Did it keep getting furthered from there? You talked about being able to just sort of openly talk to people and see what they want to go. I'm like, hey, let's come to this party. Let's do this thing.
Yeah, I think there were definitely stages of it. Like, there's a certain purity to being a kid and being in school, and all you have to do is be a kid and be in school, or whatever insert number of extracurriculars that you you're
X
supposed to
amount
do
of extra
or whatever.
time.
Yeah. Or whatever, like responsibilities with family or your community. So there was that like kind of era of fairly pure, not really being told much about the creative process other than what was happening in my classes. Because you're just very basically learning how to be a person in the world still. And so a lot of my energy was devoted to that. And then after middle school, I moved to Santa Barbara, and at that point it was like a pretty brutal time for my family, just like divorce and all this stuff, and complicated things that I didn't know how to process. And so going into high school, at that point, I had been like the star of a bunch of musical shows. My writing had pretty much like arrived and kind of stayed at like a short story level, and not it wasn't like a big practice. It wasn't something that, like, my goal in my brain was like make other people in my life happy about what I'm doing. And what I was getting a lot of positive feedback on was the performing. So it's
Oh,
like
okay.
that's top priority. One, I liked it. I don't think that I would have survived doing it for very long if I didn't find it interesting.
So I liked what you were saying though, with you kind of have an equal measure of the writing and the acting being enjoyable to you.
Mhm.
And like you said, you wouldn't have stuck with it if you weren't also getting something. But there's that little bit extra push of like, oh, this is the thing that seems to be pleasing people the most.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was more, well, I think the thing was, I knew on some level that with performing, because I was using my voice in a very specific way, saying other people's words, it was a very safe place to be.
Hmm.
But with writing, you're using your own words, sharing your own ideas in a way, even if you're just writing a poem that's very cryptic or whatever, or a short story that's like, like so specifically about like the sensory details and not like making a statement that you think, which I guess is better because it's less preachy. But yeah, so like oddly, it's maybe better that way. But I think because performing was a little bit safer in that way, for what I needed at that time to feel safe was to focus more of my energy on what can I do that is like a really, I don't know, like, yeah, make people happy. And by people I mean, yeah, like certain figures in my life that I really wanted to feel relief, or like relief from difficult circumstances or relief from uncertainty. I would have loved to be, to use whatever gifts or whatever I had to go, I'm going to be okay. Don't worry about me. And
Mhm.
I like need to be successful so that that burden is taken off everyone else.
You're looking at the situation in front of you and like, this person is struggling in their own way too. The only panacea I can offer is,
I got to
this
take care of my own
acting,
shit.
this I can take care of myself. Like it's the let me take a burden off you.
Right. The aim is not really open imaginatively as much of like, what do I want for my life? Although I did like, whenever I saw a show or a movie, I was like, that could be me. I really loved that. I love that feeling of like imagining that I'm doing all the things that the actor is doing.
It's
Um,
I think that's something everyone experiences that can enjoy art, right? There's like an almost like ADHD level of like, I could go to Greece. Like, oh yeah,
yeah,
I could
totally.
go change my life. Maybe I should eat, pray, love.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's just hard not to like impressively put yourself onto stuff.
Of course. And that's why, I mean, like, I think, at least for me, we go to art because we're looking for ourselves in it, or we're looking for, you know, whatever that, that's why people talk about things needing to be relatable in any kind of art form, because otherwise, why are we really watching it if it's not relating to our life? Maybe, I feel like people say that they watch things that have nothing to do with their life, but still, there's something that's fascinating. There's something that's resonating. That's just not the way reality, like existence works to me, is that there's no relation.
Well, I
But
mean, we as creatures, right? We always are trying to define the variables around us. There's kind of the argument
yeah,
that people enjoy, like, quote unquote, popcorn TV, like reality shows and stuff, because there's a level of like defining self against it, of like,
mhm.
oh, at least I'm not like that. Or
That's a good
can you
point.
believe that would happen? Like you're
Right, right, right.
expressing.
It's either you're like really identifying it with it, or you're feeling like, oh, or you're like kind of putting yourself against it in
Hmm.
a way, or you're like, oh, I'm not like this. I know who I am because I'm not like this, or like, how insane is that? And I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting.
I think something I'd like to broach with you because I feel like you'd be a great person to talk with us about. And for our listeners, probably a lot of them are dealing with it is like, honestly, for me too, it's something I struggle with. But how do you deal with overcoming the sort of inherent fear that develops around wanting to do something creative? The coming up with an idea and trying to shoot it down before it ever makes pen to paper. Like how do you contend with that?
I feel like that connects a lot to what I was saying about, like what life intention. Like, is your intention with what your art is to make other people happy? If it is, if any of your intention in life is to make other people happy instead of yourself, uh, it's probably because, early on at some point you're like, I need to make sure. It's like a safety thing. It's like very rooted in childhood, from what I've noticed. And if you feel like it's not enough for you to just make yourself happy with whatever you're doing, or it's not worthy, that is a learned belief. You don't come out like that. That's something that you picked up on.
Hmm.
And whether or not you have an awareness of it, I think it's a lot harder if you're so afraid that you don't want to even look at it. I think that's a lot of what happens when people feel blocked. Is it's like, I know something's wrong, but I can't tell what it is because it won't let me see it. And what's helped me, intermittently, it's just like layers and layers and layers, and over time you learn different things, or you learn it twice, or you learn it better the next time. What's helped me is just, well, one, advice from really, really smart people that are living the way that you see yourself in here, when you can be imaginative, how you want to live. And a lot of the time, at least for the people that I want to be living like, they're brutally honest with themselves about what's not going right or what they don't like in their life. They're not afraid to admit that they feel unsatisfied in some way, or that they're not happy in some way, or there's no like have you ever read the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle?
It's a have.
It's so good. I feel like I've pretty much read it by osmosis of just seeing quotes on Instagram. But I just finally like really started reading it, and I'm like halfway through. But a
Awesome.
lot of Glennon's story, it's like a creative nonfiction type of thing, is um, about it's called Untamed because she realized so much of like her upbringing was about, especially as a woman, was being tamed into a very specific role, and being tamed into what were her expectations of her, like her generation. I think she's like Gen X. um, Her generation, a lot of it was just like, you need to be happy, and if you're not happy, something's wrong
Hmm.
with you if you're not happy. And you're not happy within the very specific construct of like, you're married to a man and you have kids and your work is great, but it's not so much you don't see your kids, or these really absurdly specific expectations that are not explicitly directly said to you, but they're constantly being telegraphed, that it's like, this is what you need to be, or this is what you need to do, or else you will be outcast, or else it's just fear. It's just pure fear that
There's
you're unconsciously just accepting.
yeah, there's like this weird. That's a good way of putting it. It's not immediately told to you. No one's standing there saying, "You will do this by 30. You will do this," but it does have this knock-on effect of like someone plastering a wall constantly. That's just defining it more and more and becomes thicker and thicker. It's like I got to get married by 30. I got to have kids by 35. Like no one's telling you that, but just everything around you seems to keep pushing that box onto you.
Right. And I think there's also, um, yeah, it's about fear and safety. There's a certain comfort in going, well, I'm doing what I was told. It's not my responsibility anymore. If you can,
Oh,
I think a lot of creative block is about avoiding responsibility for your own life and your own decisions. Because the truth is, anybody can create at any time. And maybe it's like drawing in the sand. Maybe it's just saying something out loud. Maybe it's thinking something. That is creating. no one's stopping you, really. There's of course insane extenuating circumstances where like your art maybe is limited by some kind of oppressive situation externally, and that could be like very immediate or like more like a country or whatever. But still, it's your choice to create or not, or to try, or to work towards that, or to take action towards that. And if you are not taking action, but there's some part of you that really wants to, because everybody is creative, everybody's an artist, which I learned from The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron, she's the best. If you're not doing that and some part of you wants to, then you're just the most unsatisfying feeling ever. And so then what happens is, if you're so afraid and you're not aware that that's what's happening, you're not aware that's what's feeling, what you want to do is numb the feeling out, escape it in some way. TV, food, overworking, distracting yourself from
escapism,
relationships, escaping. It's like, if you don't want to feel anything, one, that feeling is not going to go away by you avoiding it. It's just going to make it stay there for longer and delay any other growth or progress. And then two, it's like, once you feel it, you can move up to the next level. It's like, I feel like, yeah, if life is a video game, every level, every boss is something you don't want to feel. It's like,
yeah,
and you feel it. You have the
7 deadly sins of bosses.
To completely surrender.
Yeah. That's actually, I do like that as an analogy, because it does also kind of, there's the argument of some people are getting to play Mario and some people are playing Dark Souls.
Oh, that's funny.
There's sometimes that feeling of just like, I've been at the same boss for 46 attempts and it just keeps crushing me. And some people are like, I found Yoshi. This is great. But I don't know, something you said, like, while talking on that, something that dawned on me is, I think, my frame of reference is I do education, and there's always the idea of like teaching students to learn from failure, and that failure is not a static place. A 3D printed object failing is a learning opportunity. There's something to figure out why it didn't work, why it didn't go. But I almost feel like, in the context of the creative element we're talking about, specifically listeners, I want you guys to think about this. The only failure that could really genesis out of this is not attempting something.
Boom.
Exactly. Like, it's not a plateau. Like, the happiness, like this thing is not a plateau. If you have an idea for a short music video you want to do, figure it out. Shoot it on your iPhone. Shoot it on a camcorder that you found in the attic, whatever. But like, feel empowered to do that. And I also want to say, like, short films, anything like that, send it to us. We'll review it. If it doesn't make it, that's not a failure. That's not a your film isn't good enough, you should feel bad. That's just maybe it didn't fit our situation. But just having done it, that's the success. Like, having pursued it.
Absolutely. Well, okay, I totally agree. I completely agree. I feel like there's so many things to say about, if you're, speaking to someone that wants to create and feels a little stuck in some way. One, it's like, okay, yeah, the inside out stuff that we were talking about with taking responsibility and like recognizing what is in your control or what isn't in your control. And then going, okay, what are the steps? You've got to break it down into tiny bite-sized pieces, because when you're learning something at any age, it doesn't matter. You can't just like swallow it all at once and expect it to be a genius or something. And this, I really struggle with this. I avoided songwriting for so long because I was afraid of hearing something that I didn't like, or it just being decided by whatever voices in my head that I was doomed to be awful forever, or like it just is this way or it isn't. You got it or you don't.
Yeah, it's almost weird. It's like binary systems are usually kind of bad.
Yeah. There's something about
not to explode our potential options of topics.
Right. Yeah. So it's like like you were saying, just go film something in your back, or like get a camcorder, use your iPhone, whatever it is. Like, if you feel curious about something, notice pay really close. It's kind of a mindfulness thing. Notice, oh, I feel curious about this. oh, I have a desire in this. This is why journaling helps me a lot. Is just go, this is what I'm feeling. There's so many thoughts that come in. They need to go somewhere. And then when you're looking at them on the page, you're like, oh, that's how I feel. That's what I want. Whoa. I had no idea because I had an idea of who I was or what I wanted that's outdated. And sometimes it's easier, like in the world and society, to have a label on things like, I like this. I am this.
Oh yeah.
And then you forget, wait a second, I'm not dead, which is why, it doesn't last for that long. Our skin just sloughs off. Everything about us changes every second.
Yeah.
Cells are dying, cells are being born. So don't expect that to stay very long at all. In fact, this is actually just an illusion. I feel like if you're like having that thought, oh, I really want to create something, definitely follow that urge and really pay attention to all the thoughts that follow up right after. Because if you're noticing a pattern, okay, I want to create, I take one step to do it and then I get scared and I leave, or I don't execute. For me, a while it was just like starting, never finishing the project, because it was like, oh my God, what if I finish it and it turns out to be terrible? Or, oh my, what if I finish it and it turns out that I'm stupid or I'm an idiot? Everyone has different beliefs about themselves, positive or negative, or somewhere in between. So if you can identify what those thoughts are and then go, okay, if there are some negative beliefs, maybe one, how did they get there? Are they yours? Are they someone else's that maybe didn't follow their dreams, is a big one. Or are they beliefs that are serving to keep you small because it feels a little safer? Does it feel safer to be in the box that you're used to when you know that you are bigger than it now? And so you're numbing to go, I don't want to move. I don't want to go somewhere new that's unfamiliar. That's so normal. And everybody feels that way. But I think something else too that stopped me from being creative more openly, especially with writing, is the fear of even admitting that I was afraid. It was like this attitude of like, never let them see you sweat. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Because it was like this fear meant that I was weak, or fear as a weakness. When it's just a feeling, actually. It's not a weakness. It's your awareness of it, in fact, is a strength. And your ability to admit it to yourself is a strength. Because if you can't even admit what you are feeling to yourself, it's just, you're living in a fantasy, basically. And if you can't admit to yourself what is the truth of your reality in that moment, how are you going to create from a place of like freedom, if it's not internally there too?
You're going to constrain yourself without even realizing it. Right. And I mean, it's the, identifying a problem is the first step to solving it, that kind of triteness, but it's true. Like
it's so true across the board. And it's just like trickier when emotions are involved. Oh, yeah. Because creativity to me, if you're taking in the world and you're spitting it out, how are you doing that? You have a body, and what is your body doing? It's experiencing the world through your senses. And, it's like your nose, your eyes, the physical, obvious ones. There's the kind of more spiritual sense. There's emotions live in your gut. Did you know, I just found this out over holidays, that your gut was, if you're thinking about this on an evolutionary standpoint, the cells that then became humans, the first thing they had was a gut, like the brain came after. So it's like the gut is the mommy / daddy organ to the brain. So if you treat your life or your body knowing that, and like taking the mind kind of off its pedestal of like, my mind knows everything, I can think through any problem logically and go, wait, how am I feeling about this? First, it might help you kind of like take a shortcut to figuring out what do we actually want out of life.
Yeah.
Take steps to do that.
The brain's kind of a resistor, or like a capacitor in some ways.
It's trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe don't step into traffic.
Yeah. Maybe that sandwich on the windowsill's been out for too long. Maybe no. But I mean, it's funny because I don't know. I like that. Like sometimes your gut is the right way to go and the brain will get in your own way on it. But I like the idea that like observational is really important. And I think too, kind of going back a step, what we're talking about, just the being aware of the fear, but being able to understand it and try to like step beyond it, kind of put it out there sometimes can be art in its own ways. And I do want to kind of segue that into Dawn, which was a short film you submitted to us that we weren't able to select, but I was watching through again, and I would love to talk about because it's a story of a someone trying to go perform like a an amateur night duo performance. Their person doesn't show up for them, so they've got to go out solo in an entire like it is just that feeling of that contained fear that everyone has. And I think too what stands out to me kind of just in our conversation is it also has a lot of moments of people kind of failing this person. You know, it's the duo doesn't show up. It's the parents being upset that they're out and trying this thing. And it's just this person having to find that sort of internalized strength to be like, I need to go on stage, whether I fail, succeed, people clap, it's whatever. It needs to come out of it.
Exactly.
So like what was the I like obviously it's a shared experience, but what was the moment where you're like, I want to put this on like a short and make people see this because like, I think they'll get it.
Oh, I think, okay, well, I did that as a assignment for one of my classes at CSUN. It was my first semester in the actual film department because they only do the last 2 years of the 4 year. And everything before that is like GE, you're kind of prepping and then you apply to be in the program. I did that. So basically, we broke up into groups. I was very committed to becoming a director, and it was other people didn't feel. I don't know. There were limited spots. I got one, and I was like, okay, wow, I'm a director. What am I gonna do? What am I going to do with this platform? In a way, I felt like okay, this is an opportunity to do something that I feel really connected and authentic with, and that also like serves the environment that it's going into, like school. And I had an idea. Everything when it comes, film or writing, whatever, it always comes as images and like senses at first. And I just had this idea, this image, an energy of someone named Dawn, who was very bright and bubbly and very like yellow, if that makes sense. Kind of like open and curious and excited, but also like, what's it going to be like? And naive, like, yeah, just like a very youthful, but energetic and like committed energy. And so I had
soft flesh in a rough environment.
Yes. But undeterred by it, like, not taking it on, kind of invincible in a way. There's something there's something called, internal family systems therapy, which I love. And it's basically the process of okay, like let's say you've had some kind of traumatic experience. It could be any kind of, people define trauma differently, but like basically a bad feeling occurred and it comes up in your life in other times or it gets triggered. So you notice like, okay, what's the first memory that comes to you, and what's that age? Like when did that happen? And then you basically kind of open into yourself like there's many different parts within your psyche, and there's those different ages that kind of get frozen in time. So when they're called upon, they're like, I'm here and you should be afraid of this. Or, insert emotion. And so there's a part that I call Rainbow Baby, and Rainbow Baby is the very base part of me that emerged into the world and was like, what is this? This is amazing. Like, whoa, just like shooting love out of every part of it. It's like I'm imagining like layers.
Care Bear in all directions.
It's like, and so he say Rainbow Baby is my term for this kind of emanating love, totally trusting and knowing, the truth of abundance in the world or in their life. And like basically I want to be Rainbow Baby all the time, and I try. But there is a naivete also. There's like they haven't seen, but it's, yeah, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, Dawn reminds me of Rainbow Baby because, the story is not about her, getting in there, getting to the contest, everything goes wrong, and then she wins or they love her and like she gets signed for a record deal or something. It's really the accomplishment, like you said, is she did it. She just did it. She went and she committed to it, and she didn't, even though it wasn't what she expected, which fucking every creative project pretty much is. She went through with it anyway because she was curious and because she was there, and it was important to her, and she was afraid. It wasn't like an easy breezy thing. That's like where the conflict is. It's like, yes, there's literal external conflicts, like the duo partner doesn't show up. Her mom calls her and is like yelling at her over the phone for being out of the house when she wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
And then she gets like a drink spilled on her. She drops her guitar, like all of these things, and it gets out of tune. And then even on stage, spoiler alert, the string pops while she's playing.
Yep.
And everything gets fucked up. And but she's still there, and she still has her voice, and she still has the ability to play and do the thing. And then she gets kicked out of the bar. She's under 21. But then at the end, it's like she just smiles because, like, the point of it was not to show this. I guess, yeah, the maybe broadly expected like goal of or definition of success is like do really well in the eyes of other people.
Yes, the Hollywood version of this movie would be that she gets a contract signed by someone in the audience, and everyone does the
like,
slow clap at her.
Platinum, yeah,
yeah.
And
but that's what I love about this was we're in spoiler territories, but what I love about it, and go watch it, hopefully it'll be up on our site, is the like ending is her feeling such a joy, like a genuine, like internalized mouth scream of joy at having completed this thing. Because that was really the goal, was like, I just completed it. And it really, to me, what it hit home with was like, I realized I spend so much of my time educating with students, feeling like a comedian dying at a stand-up routine. And I realized that I think I'm now at a point where I'm kind of a nerd to it, and it makes me a better educator. Oh. Like I go up there and students aren't talking back. They're not throwing ideas back at me. They're not responding. Unfazed. I'm like, cool, we're going to keep doing stuff. I'm going to show you how to podcast. I'm going to show you how to make 3D prints. Oh, you're uninterested? Cool. I can tell you're a contrarian. So am I. I don't care what you do. What are you going to do now? Like, and just suddenly like that feeling of what victory isn't like, I'm, Edward James Olmos doing a stand and deliver and everyone's like, oh, or Captain, my Captain. Oh my God. It is these students are getting something. And I'm not like the ego's gone. And for me, that's something I really liked about watching this short was I was just like, I freaking finally get that. Like,
I'm so glad.
I was really like, yes.
I feel you on the comedian just like bombing as a teacher. I teach classes sometimes to varying ages through a foundation that brings music teachers to, like through the Boys and Girls Club. And,
awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so fun. And since school has been out, they did like a summer camp, or not summer camp, opposite, winter camp thing, where I taught songwriting to kids that were like probably the oldest age of a group of kids people that I have taught. And oh my God, the first class is definitely like, they are not digging whatever this is at all. And my job is not to be liked. My job is not to feel like they owe me that at all, because they fucking don't. Honestly, I mean, if they're there and they're there for like 8 hours a day on their break, it's probably like parent is working, they need them out of the house, or they need someone to actually be watching and taking care of them. And it's an amazing program. But as the kid, it's like, you don't have a choice. You're here, like maybe you want to be at your friends, maybe you want to be doing anything else. And so I realized then it was like, okay, what do I remember about being that age? I felt like nobody was listening to me.
Yep.
So how can I make this an opportunity to remind them I want to hear them and they will be heard in this space? But it will be a little awkward. We are going to, I'm going to get their bodies moving with some jumping jacks to some boogie wonderland. And we're going to, and I'm going to turn the fluorescent lights off because I hate those fucking things.
Yep.
And so, I mean, and being a creative teacher is definitely like, there's a lot more opportunity for me to talk feelings or do things that will create, more of a connection. And, or I maybe any class is like that too. I guess it's just like the perspective, but I feel like because it's more like an after school program, they don't give me a really specific curriculum. It's like teach a class on songwriting and kind of take it however you need, and they trust the individuals that are hired to have the experience needed or the, like
There,
understanding of what it is.
there's a certain freedom though that I think is in that because I'm as an educator, I'm not giving out grades myself either. Like I'm sort of instructing and showing them things. And there's a certain beauty in that because you do get to remove that certain hurdle of like, I got to give you a grade. You're failing my class or whatever. And instead being like, I'm seeing that you're disengaged. So how do we get you engaged? Like how do we make you enjoy this? Do you not like music? Or if you don't, what are things you do like? Like I've had students with podcasting who just didn't want to talk, but they wanted to like freestyle or like
Awesome.
beatbox. And I was like, it's a mic. You can do that if you want. I'll even show you how to do some like effects on it because that's the point. I just want you to enjoy the experience around it. And so
Right.
I think kind of what you're saying with that sort of interpersonal skills and those sort of connections that you've got to quickly assess with the students to sort of do a little bit of a forced segue, like that's something that stands out a lot in the movie that the short that you submitted, Bowler Up, that was
Mhm.
selected, was a lot of the part of it is that sort of interpersonal like interactions with each other of like, there's this person that was on the team. Now they're not. Now they're an enemy because of it. And like, it's that really interesting part of it. So what can you tell me about Bowler Up?
Yes. Okay. Bowler up.
Hopefully that wasn't too ham-fisted for our listeners.
Um, Bowler up came into existence similarly to Dawn, where it's like this image of a character. I guess that's all of them basically. Is like a person with an energy in a place with colors, and the first character that came to me was based on a real life person who ended up playing the drummer. His name's Christian, and he plays CJ the DJ. Flash Cal Howard. And what I saw was a really playfully melodramatic, like overdone, scorned, rejected person that that had a lot of flair about it too. And kind of like a Scott Pilgrim-y type universe.
It does have a bit of like a Scott Pilgrim vibe, or even I think there's an episode of the animated regular show that had kind of a musical like battle thing that I found
Oh,
very like
cool.
humorously similar.
Yes, I have lots of inspiration from Scott Pilgrim and just like those kind of things where it's like mixed media too, and it's just basically. I mean, Scott Pilgrim is based on a like a graphic novel
A
too.
manga series, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually one of my favorite
Series,
things
yeah.
ever.
Oh, there you go. And
And
they're
then
doing like
actually,
an animated series
real
now.
quick, Hunter, if I
Yes.
can interrupt you for a sec, do you have a light that you want to throw on? Because I'm
Yeah,
losing
I
you.
was just thinking that is that bright enough, or do we need more? I can get
That's that works if if you have like a top light that's too strong.
let's
Looks like that could work.
to the legs also.
Ah, there we go.
It's better.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Totally.
So I'll take it back. Yeah, so it's Scott Pilgrim inspired, which just as an aside is one of my favorite like medias. Like I loved the manga series. It was really influential to me when I was in my 20s.
It's so good because it has a very clear perspective.
Yes.
I think it's like some artistry at its very best because it's not trying to be anything other than like totally what it is. And sometimes when you're watching something or you're reading something or consuming some kind of media, you're like, this is trying to be something that already exists, or this is trying to be something that, it's like kind of going from the outside in. Like,
Mm.
we're going to make an action rom-com with, a romantic lead that owns a flower shop and I don't know.
Somehow is affording a 3-story house on a flower
Right,
shop
right.
salary.
Exactly. Like, I've always seen this.
Yes,
But
definitely.
with Scott Pilgrim, it felt really, really authentic. That's another thing. Yeah, authentic is the word. Anything that I'm consuming or that I'm making, if it doesn't feel really real in some way, and that's not to say like not imaginative or fantastical at all, because that all is very real.
That's absolutely a good point. Is authentic does not mean that it has to be strictly earth grounded. It can be like, and this film has a lot of that. We'll probably also have it on the site of just like great transitions and sort of colorful. I like the nice and strike that pops up that gives it a little bit of that like the scorecards that come up on a bowling alley. Like
that was the
really evocative for that.
thing we were trying to do.
Yeah.
The exact thing we were trying to do. And in a dream world with like more time and resources, it's like we would have like these little like pins that like knock them
Oh
apart
yeah, the absurd
and like
like
have the faces.
explosion.
Yes, I should show. Yeah, we have this great Google Drive folder devoted to inspiration for those things. And there's so many good ones. Oh my god, the bowling alley. Yeah, whatever. I love it so much. But um, but yeah, similarly to Dawn, it started with that CJ character, and you know what I realized recently too is both of those stories are about someone that is eventually makes it to the point where they can enjoy this thing that they love doing or slash creating, aka music, aka bowling, and not make it so serious that they ruin it for themselves. Or there's no like, you know, the desire for that kind of success. Basically, once it gets thrown out the window, it's bliss. Like it's everything's so much simpler and easier. And there, what's different about those two is like Dawn, there's not as much of a struggle for her. It doesn't seem like her goal is to just succeed. Her goal really is to just get up on that stage and do it, which she does do. And for CJ, it's more like he wants it to be something that it's just not, or he wants this team that was born out of, you know, just like joyful connection to do something that's more related to, you know, whatever those internal fears for him were. Like, I'm not good enough unless we win every game, or I'm not good enough, or it's not worth playing the game if I can't do well and win.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is if you're watching really closely, you'll notice that Winnie, his biggest partner in the team and then opponent, when he's kicked off, and she's kind of like the leader. She basically, like, if she has the power to kick someone off the team, it's like they'll just listen. But she says at one point in a flashback, like, we were gonna lose, like as an excuse for, you know, kicking him off the team because his behavior became so like unmanageable.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean? Why do you care about losing if that's, or it's like both of you are doing the same thing. Like she complained that he took it too seriously and that kind of like got him stopped up. But if she were the kind of person to internalize pressure in the same way as CJ, she'd be having the same problems. They're the same character in a way, like in that way. Like they're irritated by each other because they're so similar in a way. Like the thing that she can get by on for whatever reason that he can't, he sees in her and is like maybe jealous of, or is like resentful that she's still not accepting, though he doesn't even accept it in himself. Because
it's one of the hardest things people can do, unfortunately.
Yeah. And you know, however, you know, we judge people how we judge ourselves. So yeah, I feel like that was very true about what was expressed in the film. But yeah, both Dawn and Bowler Up, born from these places of like, there's something on an artistic visual or like kind of like more of the delicious part of consuming media that I want to create and I just want to see so that I can consume it and express and just get it and see what it looks like in real life. It's just kind of crazy to go like, oh my god, I have this idea. What would it look like if it were real? And of course, you know, once it's born into the world, it's like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. But you still did it, like Dawn. And Dawn, part of it was kind of a stressful experience in the very beginning because I was assigned to a team of other collaborators. Like we all kind of technically had to pick a script together or write something together. And because I was so motivated, they were like, oh, you're going to write that. You're just going to write it. And
the standard group project issue.
Yeah. And they were very supportive and sweet, but none of them had an interest in writing. So I felt very lucky that I didn't have any competing interests in a way. That was an issue with other groups where they couldn't decide on what to do. And so I was like, I felt very, very lucky and a great DP that was just like down for learning anything and was also a musician too. So both of us being musicians about a story about musicians felt like great. But yeah, the reason I brought that up was that at the beginning, I felt like I knew what it felt like. I knew what the story felt like. I always feel like I know what I want it to feel like if we're coming from an authentic place. but the actual plot comes last. Like the actual what happens in the thing is like, ah, fuck. It's like almost like a chore to me. I'm like, I know what it already exists, but so much of I think where we get stuck in creative world is I know what it needs or what I think it should be or how it should feel, but the steps to actually getting there, it actively changes during that process. Or you're like, oh God, is this even feasible? Am I insane for thinking that this could be real? Or this plot doesn't make any sense. I'm never going to find the thing. Oh my God, I don't have any ideas, or I have so many ideas that I have no idea what's the right one. That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm so into, my brother is really, really into or MBTI. I always say IMDb, MBTI, personality trait, like things. And so it's like extrovert, introverted, or, all these things.
Is that that's like the ENTJ and stuff like that?
Yes,
Is that the
yeah.
right one? Okay.
I'm an ENFP, according to this thing. And it feels true. It feels very resonant. It's like, there's things you'll do like tarot or whatever, things that like resonate or don't. And that's all that really matters to me. As long as you're not like making laws based on it or something. But,
Fair.
But, but it's just personal development. Who gives a rat's ass? But, ENFPs, according to my brother, because he's the actual opposite of me, we're very into exploring, but we don't want to commit to one thing. We want the best possible discovery. And what's funny too about being with Daniel is that he's my brother's same type. So we're like opposites and complementary opposites. So like whatever, he's more like, oh, this is the first thing that works, boom, we're doing it. And for me, I'm like, I think we can have a better one. And so I will get lost in these rabbit holes, like never finishing something, and I'm getting better at that. And I don't really know what his problem is. We'll see. But I think he has one. So far, it's fucking perfect. But, but it's very helpful for me to witness that behavior and just kind of trust, like, sometimes whatever it is good enough, or good enough for the moment. And so when I'm writing, and like with Dawn, there was not enough conflict. I think I like empathized too much with the character, and I was like, I want it to be easier for her. I don't want it to be hard. And it's like, what are you even watching if the person just is easy and it gets everything they want or whatever? So it was a really simplified version of the story to start. And then I got some critical feedback from the class and from my professor, and I was like, you're wrong. No, I know what the story is. They were totally fucking right about something being off. Some of the best writing advice I've ever gotten is that, and this is like a clip from Bill Hader on some Instagram.
I know what you're going to say, yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Is that,
but repeat it for our listeners, please.
Yes. The best thing you can do, like, the best thing you can get from someone else reading your material is not their solution for whatever they think is wrong, but the fact that something might be wrong about whatever they're talking about, whatever area. So like,
I think this part doesn't work. And then when they start telling you, here's what I do, that's when you stop listening.
That's what way better put. Yeah, it's like so simple and so true. Because it's like, yeah, then otherwise it's like them writing it. And so I find it super helpful when people are just like, I didn't really think that this made sense. And they just stop there. And some of the time, asking your friends that don't write or have any interest in that kind of a world is the best like way to get that response. Because they're also maybe not as interested in playing the game of like, oh, I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
And never giving you like actual advice, maybe because they just don't, it sucks to feel like you're far away from the goal.
There's a sweet spot for honesty. You don't have to sugarcoat it. You don't have to necessarily be brutally honest, but I would like an honest opinion on this.
Yes. And you don't have to treat it like it's a punishment either, because criticism, if you don't have it, then you're not going to get better at some stuff. And like, I mean, good criticism, not the kind that's like, you should stop, or like,
this is terrible and you should feel awful is not really helpful.
Yes, that's not criticism. You didn't talk about the art at all. It's all about me. It's all personal. So you can't say, don't take it personally, but you suck.
No offense. You're a terrible person. No offense, though.
No offense. You're really bad at this. Like, also, that's just completely subjective. Yeah. But because the funny thing about writing is it's just product. Like, nobody is scoring you during the process and going 10 points. Like, it's entirely up to you how the fuck you want to do it. And if, other people are resonating, that's all that matters. It's not technique based. like performing is. And it's like, you need to nail these certain things, to rise to certain occasions, if it's like a big show or whatever. But even then, I guess different methods net different performances.
Yeah.
But I guess the only thing you need to do to be a writer is to just write. So that's the thing.
And we've talked about it on this podcast, but also don't write expecting that everything you write has to be like a finalized project or product that gets out to a film or becomes a short or whatever. Daniel's mentioned in his episode that like he's got things that just exist in the vault that are half finished or half thought out, but those are still a product that helped him learn about the next step. And a lot of the other people on the cast have talked about that.
Absolutely. It's so true. And that was such a cute cough. I was so like
Sorry, I was like, I turned from the mic.
But yeah, it's so true. There's sorry, I hope my laptop is not breathing too heavily.
Let's do the
Yeah. But yeah, Bowler Up was a similar thing where it's like, it started like, oh, I love this idea, I want to do it this way. And we basically had like 3 months, me and my friend Kiara, who produced it, that to do it, because we both were going to different schools and film schools, and we're just stacked with projects. And so we're like, okay, we're gonna do this thing. We like this idea. I was new enough to screenwriting to just not really know when a script is done, like ready to shoot. And I mean, like, where are the holes, or where the, what have I not thought about emotionally? Or because I was just focusing on the fact that I really enjoyed the stylistic idea of it and the premise, and I felt like, oh, I know this feeling. And it was a similar mistake that I almost made with Dawn, which was, oh, I feel like I know it, but then it's like, have you asked all the questions? Have you tested it on enough people? And so then when we actually got to shooting, there were some things that were like, fuck, I didn't think about this. And we basically edited it how we thought we were going to have it, and then it wasn't really working. So did a whole fucking rehash, like rewrote some of the script and used some and like rewrote a lot of some of the narration from Winnie to fill in some of the blanks, or like to add some of the story, and then used a lot more of the animation mixed media stuff to basically tell the story that I wanted to tell, that I didn't realize was not on the page yet. And
all of a sudden you're realizing the exposition is not as well defined as you had originally hoped.
Yes, exactly. And like, you'll always figure it out by the ending. I think that's what it is. It's like, wait, what was the point? What's the feeling we're trying to reach here? It was like straight up, we shot most of, like, all the bowling alley stuff when the bowling alley was closed. They closed at midnight, so we could actually realistically start shooting around like 1:30 or 2, and then we had to wrap up before they opened at like 8 a.m. So everything we shot is in when you're supposed to be sleeping time. And there's like, and one of the most critical scenes where there's like this redemption scene between the two main characters was shot at like 7 a.m. You've been up for almost 24 hours. And I'm now realizing, oh, what is the point? Or like, what do they need to meet on? Or like, why is the emotion not as satisfying as I want it to be? Or where do I need, whose story really is it? Is it linear counts of them together? Like, what is that? What are they learning from each other, really? Because I internally, some part of me is like, oh, I need to tell this story because I just feel it and it's there. And then literally over a year after writing it or having the idea, I'm like, oh, it's because of this thing in my life. And it's actually, it's like I've made, I've had these elements in films or projects before. But yeah, so I feel like I'm getting better. And it just takes it just takes doing it more and more and more to realize like, oh, what does it actually need to be? And then once you have like a touchstone feeling for what it needs to be, or how it needs to feel, or what questions it needs to answer, or whatever your method is, then you're like, oh, great, I finished it. But it just took up until that film project to go, like, I don't know, I like, this is a film, or this script is done, or like, this is what it is, I guess. Like, people tell me this is what it looks like one, it smells like one. Is it one? I don't know. And then you find out when you're making it, you're like, this is what it takes. And so definitely an eye-opening but very difficult process that honestly was kind of a bit of a creative injury for a while because it just wasn't what I had hoped or expected. Dawn was a big success in my small pond of being in school and having and going like, I've only made like 2 other films before. And look how good this one is. My like inner desire to feel successful in that way was like very tied to like being young, being inexperienced, or like, kind of catching up because I spent all this time trying to be a musical theater kid, or just being one and thinking I was going to go to college for it and then not getting into any of the schools that I applied. And then just going, so what the fuck is left? And then you realize, oh, there's other things that I need to do, I guess. And this is whatever, the way to funnel me into those spaces. And I can always come back. But that part of me at the time was like really interested in keeping up this illusion that I magically knew what the fuck I was doing enough to just not have a flop or flop experience where it was like hard or it was like not flowing as well. And there were definitely issues with Dawn. There's always, you can't make a film without like everything going wrong basically. And we had like lost our location 10 days before the shoot.
Yeah.
It's like it's in a bar, like it's really specific. Everyone's schedules are insane. And they're like, we did it on a lot of free labor, but everything else was $1,750, the whole budget. And so yeah, I think I had this like idea for any creatives listening that are like, how do you become this or that or this or that? I'm gonna say it's rare / like it just never really happens that people post publicly or share publicly every single thing they make. So don't look at someone's page or whoever you admire and go, that's all it took for them to be amazing, or that's all it took for them to do something that required a lot of skill or to build up that skill. That's not true. And in fact, they're not saying that. Sometimes you need to say that to certain people so they'll give you money, but but you don't, like, you're not saying that for any other reason really, unless you're like me at that time and going, I want people to see me a certain way entirely from an egotistical standpoint, because I'm afraid that if I'm not good enough by this X standard, then I don't deserve to be in this space, or whatever the belief is. The belief is basically I'm not allowed to be bad at this, or it's like
you've got to be the wonder kind. You've got to be the one who just was naturally deft at it.
Right. I need to succeed at this, or else I guess I feel some like, oh man, I have so much support from different family members and people in my life, or people that expect a lot of me. And maybe this is me totally just going like, other people think about me so much. The truth is, they're in their own movies and they're in their own lives. And you gotta just like wake up to those thoughts and go, hey, maybe if there is someone that's literally telling you and you're younger, you're more like in the grasp of whoever is taking care of you. If someone's like, you need to be good at this because blah, 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 that's one thing. But if no one's telling you that at the present moment and you're feeling that, you can let that go. You can.
Yeah.
It's not there anymore. It's only there because you probably got used to it and you feel comfortable with it being there. It makes you feel like safer. Yeah, it's like, it's a very loosey-goosey world to be in if you're like, I'm making stuff just because I enjoy it. There's so much backlash around creative, because people are just blocked too. They're like, no, you need to create only if it is giving something back to the world, or you need to create only if it is because you are this person that we haven't heard from that much, or you're representing something that people need to, like, there's always going to be some kind of decided
foisted expectation.
Right. Yeah, perfect. Foisted expectation. And it's kind of trendy too. It's like it changes over time.
Yeah, it's
the zeitgeist. It's like people will care more about, art coming from some way, like art being about something, or people will care more about, feeling like they deserve to be an artist or not. Like, there's so many like if you're not looking closely enough and you're just seeing the very, very watered down kind of like icon sized, like 10 pixel version of whatever the art form is or the movement or whatever, like punk music or anything, then you don't really understand what it's trying to do. You're seeing like, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to
You're
finish this.
kind of, I think what you're stepping on and making a point to is that there's a lot of unintentional gatekeeping that happens in a lot of, media and punk rock or any sort of genre thing you can connect yourself to. And that it's not, don't let someone else limit your ability to be involved in the things you want to be involved in. And I would say too, to anyone listening, like, as Hunter's been talking about this, none of these were a perfect, immediate, everything worked out the first try. That's okay. Your things are going to be weird. Stuff's going to fall apart. Like the place you're supposed to shoot isn't going to work out. But that's the thing that I really want to stress to you about this whole creative conversation is that's okay. Figure it out, adapt. Honestly, that's the best skill anyone can possibly have is just being able to adapt to a situation and not shut down.
So true. It's so true. That's number one way to stay kicking in anything, in life, in art, in whatever you're trying to do. Like, stay open. Embrace the fact that change is happening. And that's so much easier said than done. Because
Oh, of course. Yeah.
we get so comfortable.
Don't treat this as a platitude. It's a working progress.
And also, I'm sure, like, thinking about that concept, like 10 years down the line, it would be like, mean something else entirely too, based on whatever life experiences are had until that point. It's just the most true thing is the only constant is change, and that applies to fucking everything because humans are nature. We like to kind of remove ourselves and go like, let's get obsessed with how humans are different from animals so that we can feel like we're worth more than them, or blah, 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 or worth more than plants or whatever. It's like we're all cells, we're all this, we're all a part of this. We can't be without everything else. So you basically are everything together. The more you can embrace the fact that separation is an illusion, the more just in the rest of your life, that philosophy bleeds in and you're like, oh, there's no competition in this art. Or there's no, like, all I can do is learn and, keep a personal best of doing what I love and doing what I care about. Not even the number of things or being prolific with yourself. Not even, how many people reach out to tell you like, oh, I loved your thing that you did. It's just how you feel about if you're enjoying it. Again, so much easier said than done because I've made so many projects, songs, whatever, talking about how frustrated I feel about the fact that I'm not doing that. And I'm sure there will be more.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good place to kind of close out on. But before we close out the podcast, is there anything else you want to add or that we didn't touch on that you really feel like should have been expressed? Or are we just going to push for an episode 2, which I think would be great?
I'm so down for an episode 2. Whatever I will, I try to find my way back to the question, but I've just like ventured off into a whole other landscape. But
I think we perfectly have a frame of even a good title now for our own separate podcast about just self-help and understanding and just rainbow babies.
That's so good. I would love for rainbow babies to be a thing.
I'd be on board. That'd be a great. It'd just be Hunter teaches a white dude about life.
What do I know?
I'm open to learning.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
What an amazing opportunity to talk about all this, and you ask really, really great questions. And
thank you so much.
You're yourself a very interesting person.
I appreciate that. I tend to think of myself as pretty like bog standard, but I appreciate that.
Not even at all. I look forward to more conversations, taped or not.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, I just really appreciate what all of you guys are doing with the festival and with kind of like the educational outreach and with the awareness of just like, doing things like a podcast, or there's just so many ways to bring people together and talk about things or educate accessibly. And I love how you're doing it. And you're doing it so beautifully, and it's really great. It's really fun to consume the media. I haven't listened to all the episodes, but I've listened to a couple, and I really just like all the topics talking about. I love it so much. So
Appreciate that.
and it doesn't. Sometimes when people start podcasts, it feels like, like an opportunity for them to like listen to themselves talk, and this is the complete opposite of experience. I was like, I feel like I'm talking so much.
Oh, you had some great stuff. I really loved our like the pathway we were going. It was fantastic.
I didn't prepare any questions, but yes, great one. So thank you. And if there's an episode 2, I'm gonna watch out.
Yeah, it'll be stellar. Well, thank you so much for being on, Hunter, and thank you, listeners. This was the Hemet Film Festival podcast. I hope to see you next time.